This is the tutorial on TDO files. We're going to create a file which you can then load in to DDMT alongside your data, which will apply any magnetometer offsets. It will offset the time of the internal clock of your data. So let's get stuck in. We're going to open up DDMT. We're going to select the data. This time I'm going to be using wild dog data from ZSL Zoo. The dog's actually called Celios. In this specific example, I'm going to be showing a good full calibration. It's important to set the working directory, as this is where our TDO is going to be produced. I'm just going to leave it as my desktop. Then we load in data. Here's my drawing window, and first thing we need to do is find the calibration. This should be a distinct set of movements that should be quite clear, which were undertaken to not only offset the time but also fill a M-sphere. So if I just zoom in on a section, there's mine. It's quite clear and distinct. If you compare it to the rest of the data, which is quite varied with no structure whatsoever, a calibration is fairly obvious. One of the most obvious things is the high values in the X, Y, and Z generated during the up and down motion, the side to side motion, and the back and forth motion. Here's those high values I was talking about. Well, the first thing we're going to do is offset the time. Now, some people choose to do a different set of movements or a different signature to offset the time. I always use the start of the calibration because for me, it's the most distinct thing and usually is what is used to offset the internal clock. The daily diary has no way of communicating with external devices like global position systems or GPS. This means the daily diary is almost recording like a stopwatch. So we need to offset the data to make sure that it's local time and date. So we do this by finding when precisely the calibration starts. So this calibration started with a clear up and down motion. There seems to be a bit of noise beforehand, but I really do believe these high values here are where the calibration began. I'm selecting exactly when I think the person who undertook this calibration began those motions. So I'm going to select when one of the axes is even slightly stimulated after being left motionless and when the VEDBA begins to rise. Next, we go into time/date offsets. I'm going to put in today's date, but you need to put in the date the device was calibrated. So we can set that. You have to set the date first, and then we move on to the time. So I'm just going to do the time right now. And it's really important that the calibration is done to the second. So I'm just going to make up a second here. Then we're going to click this button here, which is going to set the time for the DD from the white line. Once these two buttons have been clicked, that means the time of the data from this point onwards should be correct or will be calibrated to local time. It's worth noting that any time before the calibration or before you undertook this offset will be incorrect. Our time's now offset. Once that has been undertaken, it can't be repeated, so make sure you get it right. If you do get it wrong, just close down your application and then restart. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to offset our mag. Now, to do this, we need to bookmark all of the tumble, all of the almost Tai Chi, some people call it, these selected moves to try and not stimulate the acceleration too drastically, but actually stimulate the magnetometry and feel out every orientation the device can go in. Now, this person's clearly done a really nice tumble here. If we get the time up, yep, they did it for a good 6 minutes. meaning they probably covered all orientations. Now I'm going to bookmark that. To bookmark that, I'm going to use the shortcut at the top of the drawing window. If we just move the control panel down, the shortcut will be clearly listed that if you do a left and right mouse click together, you can activate the bookmark selection. So if your white lines are covering what you want to bookmark, which I've done here, I've got my left click here, my right click there. I'm happy with that data, and then I'm just going to left and right click together to bookmark the selection. All done. And then you'll have this small yellow text come up stating the bookmark number and the events you bookmarked. Next, we're going to use the 3D mag control. So we're going to need our 3D controls. So we go show 3D. Once this comes up, we can then use these buttons at the top left here and click initiate magnetometer correction. On the left, we have what the data looks like currently, and the central is going to be the data in process. We're now going to select the data that's going to be used for the magnetometer correction that's going to appear up on the right. To go over what we're talking about, I'm going to use the intuitive 3D controls, which involves a lot of dragging and clicking, to show you how the magnetometer data is sitting off the standard or the normalized mag sphere. So this process is going to take our mag data or our M sphere and put it on the normalized sphere. To select, we're going to go back to our bookmark. So I've just hidden 3D there. We then need to do this unique action to select that bookmark ready for mag sphere correction. You'll notice now we've got the mag sphere correction up. Amongst the yellow writing describing the bookmark, we have, if you look at the second from bottom line, it says mag sphere correction not selected. And then it gives you a little instruction on how to select the data for this correction. It just says left alt on the keyboard and then the right mouse button. So I'm just holding the left alt, click the mouse, and now that data has been selected. So if we go back to 3D, we now have the sphere on the right. This is our selected data for the correction. Left click the yellow button and it's going to centralize the data best it can. It may take a few seconds. Once it's been centralized, we then need to correct for any ellipsoids. So ellipsoiding is where the data will try and almost create oval shapes, and we want it to be as spherical as possible. So to do this, we just left click the green button in the center. This will take a few moments, and that will be mag correction complete. We'll now go back to initiate the magnetometer correction, and we'll see our mag data is really round and spherical, and it sits on that M sphere as best as possible. Hopefully that makes sense. This is a really nice complete calibration. Whoever did this did a great job. So I'm just going to click the same button to close that window. We've done the date, the time, we've done the mag. Now what we need to do is the orientation. Back on the 3D panel or the 3D window, we're going to right click to bring up the menu of different plots we can produce. And we want to use the device orientation. Once we've clicked that, we get up a display of a daily diary circuit board with an arrow inferring the front of the animal. Now what we need to do is we need to produce the orientation of our device in relation to the animal to get the mag data to offset to give us true heading. So to do this, we're going to select the second button down. We're going to right click, go along to the top button again and right click again for more controls. Go to the button second from the bottom to select the device that you used. You have the square option, the elongated option, which is the most common, the thumb, and the brand new Alice tag. Now that's selected, you go down to orientation, and every possible orientation has been listed for you, and you just need to select your right one. Now I remember the device being on its side and the switch was the closest to the front, the switch being this grey square here. So once you've selected the correct orientation using your pictures or notes or memory, you want to left click to confirm that orientation. So if we left click, might take a few seconds. Brilliant. So to try and ensure that your calibration and offsets have been applied, we can go to mag offs DD orientation animal. It's just going to show you that your offsets are being corrected for. We can change the orientation to see it change within this panel. So once I change the orientation, you'll see on the right, all the mag X, the mag Z, all flip change and invert. See how they're inverted there? They went red. Okay, let's put that back in the correct orientation. Once you're happy with that, you can then export your TDO to be loaded in later on. So to export a TDO, we go input output, file output save. I would advise changing the name. So at the moment, by default, it's set as file name. So I'm going to actually call the TDO the same as the text file. So there's no way there can be any confusion. So if I go find my Celios data, I'm just going to copy and paste the text name. And then we're going to click export time date offsets.tdo file. Let's go find it so you know what it looks like. There it is. Really small file, but an extremely useful one, and something I'd recommend doing as soon as you've got your data back is producing these TDOs. Just a quick one, we're going to show you how to load in your TDO. So once the data's been loaded in, you can go File Output, File Select Load, Load TDO, and then you can find your TDO for your data. It will take a few seconds to load in. It's going to ask mag acceleration offsets corrected. Do you want to adjust the time? You want to select yes. And then it's going to ask, is the time offset being applied to a second or later text file? When you do large deployments that last over 100 days and fill a 2 GB file, you end up with more than one text file. Now, this is really interesting because on large data sets, the limit to the text files that DDMT can load is 2 GB. So when we have over 2 GB of data, for some of the 16 GB or 32 GB cards, we then start to spill into other text files. Now, this TDO can then be applied to those later text files and carry over the correction for time. If you're only using one text file, which most of the time is the case, then you want to click no. In other words, if what I said previously makes sense to you about the multiple text files and large data sets, and you're using a later text file or a different part of your data, you can select yes, but most of the time you want to select no. It takes a few seconds to apply. It will reload up your split. And there we are. We can double check. Yep, these aren't set to a 0 default. These have been slightly adjusted and changed. We can even go in to see our mag data, which has been centralized. Perfect. That was how to offset your data using a detailed, comprehensive calibration. But due to the deployment design and the time allocation in the field, you might not have that much time to do such a comprehensive calibration. So I'm going to show you what the data looks like from a quicker, more brief calibration. So I'm going to open up DDMT, select the data, make sure my working directory is set where I want it. By default, it's the desktop, which I'm happy with. Then we're going to load up this cow data. Next, we're going to find our calibration. Looks like it's here. There's the distinct pattern. Quickly do the time offset. For this example, I'll actually bring up the spreadsheet from the data to offset the date correctly. So this is cow 1. The calibration date was the 3rd of the 8th, 2017. Then we just look at the cali start, or the calibration start. It's about 5:25, and get the second absolutely right. I managed to do it on the minute. Perfect. So set the start date, set the start time from the white line. Just double check that's offset. Bring up the display. Yep, perfect. Now we move on to doing the mag, but my mag data is fairly limited. We bookmark it all the same. Initialize that mag correction and look at the difference from the previous example. We had to undertake these quite quickly because of the farmer's time and the available transport, and they're pretty poor. Doesn't mean they're not useless though. They're still really important, and they're still going to help us to offset our data, as you'll see now. That just shows some of the calibration data you might have to use to do your offsets and the variation. So I'm going to select the bookmark using the left alt right click, selected, back on the 3D. Now we have the data that's going to be used for the process. Right click to centralize. Takes a few seconds. And then just left click to apply the ellipsoid correction. Mag data complete. Let's just give it a check by initiating the magnetometer correction again. And yeah, it's nicely centralized, and it's really done a good job considering the data and the detail of that calibration. So I might have mentioned this before, but calibrating your device is all about not making your data wasteful. Nothing will be wasted. The better the calibration, the better quality the data. The less offsets, the less fiddling you'll have to do to get your data to produce signals that are most like your animal signals. Just quickly finish this off by doing the device orientation again. So this was using the old con, the square DD, and they were upside down with the power cable facing the front of the animal. Perfect. Happy with that. Left click. They've all changed. So that's the tutorial of producing TDOs using your calibrated data.